Emotional courage is the willingness to express and acknowledge all emotions, both positive and negative, without trying to suppress or avoid them. It entails and requires you to be open to experience all forms of human emotion, even when the feelings are uncomfortable or challenging. Emotional courage is all about embracing vulnerability, being authentic, and acting in alignment with your values, even when it requires you to face difficult or painful emotions. However, for nearly half of the American male population, they view expressing their emotions as a significant challenge. In 2025, according to the Priory Group, it is estimated that between 40 and 60% of all American men with mental health concerns do not seek out the assistance of a professional when they're in need of help. This is despite an estimated 77% of American men who experience mental health symptoms. It is also reported that approximately 40% of men have never spoken to anyone, a professional or otherwise, about their mental health. For my friend Jason Prinzo, he is on a journey to help men discuss something they often ignore: their mental well-being and mental health. He is a keynote speaker and mental health advocate. He's on a journey to make sure that men don't confront their mental health in silence. He's all about building communities of support. Through his own personal journey and an incident and experience he had as an infant, he guides audiences from all across the country on the negative impact of ignoring our mental health and the subsequent emotions which accompany them. He wants to serve as an example of a successful mental health story. And Prinzo joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Jason, if you're ready, my friend, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend. And I'm super excited to learn about your mental health journey, my friend.
Let's do it.
See you, and thanks for being here, my friend.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Jason, tell me why, to start our conversation, I'm curious to ask you why you think more men should put a bigger emphasis on caring for their mental health, my friend. I'm curious to get your answer there.
Well, I think we've been given bad information as young men that we need to constantly be the strong ones and that we need to be the ones that uplift everybody, that big boys don't cry and you have to shove these emotions down. And we hurt and feel emotional just like everybody else does, but we're never given an outlet to talk about that. You know, when you're a young boy, you know, you're trying to discover who you are. And for somebody like me, I'm an emotional person. I was an emotional kid, and I had to hide that emotional side of me because it made me feel so much different than everybody else. And it wasn't until I got much older that I realized that man, there are millions and millions of people that feel the exact same way I do. There are millions of men that are struggling but are afraid to say something and are afraid to speak out because of the stigma behind it, what they're afraid other people are going to think. And so they just live with it, or may not even understand what they're dealing with. They just think that whatever they're feeling and processing is normal, and they don't know that they can change and correct some of those feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for you, your mental health journey started when you were 5 years old, buddy, because a simple drawing drew the attention of a kindergarten teacher, started you on your mental health journey. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about it, buddy.
Yeah, so I had a very violent father. My father was a drug abuser and alcoholic, and when I was in kindergarten, we were asked to make a portrait, a family portrait. And the portrait that I drew was what I recognized as my family. And it was my mother and I taking my father out of a bar drunk, because that was the dynamic that I knew. Obviously, the teachers and school counselors were pretty alarmed. And we sat down the next day and talked for quite a while. And I was put into therapy at that point once they started finding out some of the things that were happening at home. And I was doing therapy in school probably from kindergarten until fifth or sixth grade. And that was my first introduction to it. I don't know that I ever understood what was going on. I just knew that there were some alarming things happening because, you know, when you're a kid and you're living your life, you don't know that anything's different than what anybody else is going through until it's pointed out to you. And that made me do some reflecting and trying to understand why the adults around me thought I was in a negative situation.
Yeah, and building on that, Jason, I'm curious to get your definition of emotional courage and how do you think that definition has changed over the years, particularly for men, my friend. So, what do you think it means to have strong emotional courage as a man, my friend?
For me, I think I became my strongest when I admitted where my weaknesses were, that I admitted to who I was, because I lived in this place where I didn't know how to be who I was and fit in masculine wise. Like I would sometimes go to hyper masculinity in order to fit in. And being emotionally available and being emotionally resilient is acknowledging what some of these problems are. You know, I struggled with masculinity a lot because I didn't have an example of what a man was supposed to be. And I was trying to figure it out while being raised by a woman. And that was something that I don't think I ever mentioned to anybody until I was in my 40s, because I was so afraid of what people were going to think about me. So when I said that I stopped going to therapy in sixth grade, it was because I was so embarrassed by a teacher coming in and having to pull me out of class and me having to explain what was going on. And, you know, I knew that I was a kid that liked to cry, and it just made me feel so different that I just shoved it down instead of acknowledging that I was having these feelings and going to seek help to work them out. And I think there are so many men that are afraid to look weak. They're afraid that they're not going to be looked at as powerful or as successful, or that they're not as mentally strong if they admit they have some sort of mental illness or are struggling in any way.
Yeah, and Jason, when we talk about masking the effects of pain, because I know that you went through that and sort of the social isolation that comes with that, and working our way through to the other side of the ledger, my friend. I'm wondering when you learned about yourself, once you knew that it was okay, that you didn't have to mask the pain anymore and come out the other side of it, my friend. What do you think you learned about yourself, and what do you think other men can glean from your example?
So I think that I learned that I'm much more normal than I gave myself credit for. And I say normal in a sense of there are many more men that are going through or have gone through what I've been through or have the same feelings that I have. And it wasn't until it's like 2017 I made a Facebook post because I've been very blessed in my life. I've carved out a great career. Put myself in a position that I never dreamed I would be in. And I kept thinking that all of these accomplishments were going to somehow now make me happy, that they were going to envelop all these feelings that I had and make them go away, right? That I was going to feel respected, that I would feel successful. And I didn't feel any of those things. It made me feel like more of an imposter. And it's because I just never learned how to cope with the trauma that I had as a kid. And so I made a post on Facebook one day just talking about how, you guys get to see, I call them my Sports Center highlights, the great dinner I went to or the event I went to last week. And it looks great, but I struggle every single day. And I made the post on a whim, and I was shocked at the responses that I got back. I mean, there must have been 200 responses of people saying, I've never talked about this before. I'm glad you're talking about it. I was mostly surprised I have several friends that were professional athletes. They played professional football, professional basketball. I boxed for a long time. I was shocked at how many of the hyper masculine alpha males were coming to me to want to talk about their problems and their struggles because they had never admitted it before. And I realized that by me accessing that and kind of being honest about my insecurities and my drive to be happy and feeling like I'm falling short was the exact same thing that all these other men were going through. They were just afraid they just had shame in saying it, but they felt comfortable coming to me and talking about it because one of their peers was finally talking about it.
Yeah, Jason, and one of the posts that you made on Instagram really caught my eye when you talked about the structure of the responsibility of a man. A lot of men think that they have to be the point of emotional security for the people in the family that they're charged of supporting. And you said that we can't be the provider unless we take away our own mental health and really develop our own sense of psychological safety. So I'm wondering if you can talk about the psychological safety that a man has to do for themselves and how it manifests itself to the other aspects of male protection in their lives, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
Well, look, a lot of men were competitive by nature, right? And we don't like to admit when we're weak, or we don't like to admit when things aren't going well. So we're competitive at work a lot of times. We're competitive in our speaking engagements. Like we always want to keep moving forward. And so we feel as if talking about any struggles will then make that our brand. And at the same time, we're trying to deal with all of these pressures from work, all of these pressures of masculinity, and the pressure of having to be the house leader, that you have to keep everybody safe there emotionally. You have to make sure that bills are paid, that, the house is in order, that everything is set. And then we try to find time for ourselves. And it's unfair because, number one, we're in positions where we have partners, right? If you're married and have kids, you have a partner. It's not just your responsibility to make all these things happen. It's just something we've been told is our responsibility, and only our responsibility our whole lives. And by the time we manage all of this stuff, there's no time left for any self-care. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces missing for men is taking time for self-care. One of the things that I like to do, Kevin, I have something I call my happy list. And these are all things that give me joy, right? And it could be traveling. It could be something as small as I love walking to a coffee shop, or I love listening to music. And I have to make sure that I fit one of those things in every day. It could be painting. I love to paint. But if I don't get something on my schedule every day in order to have some self-care or just have a moment to myself and reset, it's like a soda can that gets shaken up, and eventually somebody's going to pop the top and it'll explode. And I have to keep myself in a healthy place in order to keep from exploding.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jason, I'm curious if you could expand a little bit, because I know, as you said, self-identity and self-reflection is important. And I know that you've held several high-profile positions, my friend, including jobs at Warner Brothers, and you're also now a public speaker that talks about the importance of self-identity, my friend. So talk about your own self-discovery of your own sort of identity professionally, and how those high-profile positions have helped you to reach the point where you are today, my friend.
Well, I think now at 52, I'm finally discovering who I am, or maybe I'm just becoming comfortable with who I am. Um, I've struggled with imposter syndrome my entire life. As you mentioned, I've had a really great career. I've worked in the music industry for the past 25, 26 years. I was a VP at Warner Brothers and Capitol Records, but I never felt that I belonged. I don't have a college education. I'm not highly educated. I didn't have a lot of worldly experience. So my self discovery was built on thinking that I had faked my way through the first 48, 49 years of my life. That my success was tied up in fooling people, not necessarily because I was talented or that I deserved to be where I was. I was just getting by on fooling people. And what I've realized is there came a point where I have to start listening to the information that's coming back and listening to the things that people tell me. Because for a lot of us, like if I get a compliment, my initial reaction is, well, of course they're going to say that, they're standing here, and I don't believe it. But if they say something negative to me, I'll believe that 100%. So there came a point where I had to allow the space for me to believe that I was the person that how everybody else saw me. And I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I needed to feel that because I felt, my wife would always say to me, everybody loves you. I have never heard anybody say anything bad about you. And I would go, well, that's because they haven't met the real me. They've met the me that's like trying to make sure everybody likes me. But when I think about it, that's just who I am. Like I like people. I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories. So I'm naturally inquisitive, and that's okay. And I'll be honest, the older I get, the more okay I am with when I cry. I probably cry every other day. Like something will make me cry. And I would fight that off forever. And what I've learned is if I own my stuff first, nobody can hold it against me. So if it comes up, I'm the first guy that's like, yeah, man, I cry all the time. Like I'm so, I'm emotional that way. You guys are just gonna have to deal with it. And that way I'm owning that part of it for me, and nobody can hold it against me. And I think when you own your stuff, it becomes much more valuable than when you let other people put a price tag on it.
Yeah, and to that point, buddy, I wanted to get your thoughts on this because according to the American Association of American Medical Colleges, buddy, there are more than 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health sort of journey, and only 40% of men have reported, mental health illness and have received the mental health services that they require to get through it, my friend. So I'm curious, how do you interpret those numbers, and how can we get more men to express their need for help when those situations arise? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
It's the exact opposite of what people think they're showing. They think they're showing strength. They think they're showing resilience when they don't address the issues. There's a statistic on how many men go to their primary physician, and that number is extremely low too. I want to say it's only like 60% of men have a yearly physical. We just don't go to the doctor because we are so afraid of bad news or having to do some work because it'll make us uncomfortable. And men don't go and seek help because they're embarrassed. There's a stigma. They're afraid of what other people are going to think. They're afraid it's going to make them look weak. And none of those things are how you would describe a strong man. A strong man is somebody that faces their challenges, works to be better, takes things head on. And what most men are doing is avoidance. And the thing that I try to tell men and everybody, that there's a stigma a lot of times behind therapy, talk therapy. And I realize that it's not for everybody. But if we change the way that we look at it, so many people have had trainers in a gym. Maybe you've had a tutor or a coach, somebody that has helped you along the way. a therapist is nothing but a trainer for your brain, right? Like it's the one thing we're doing to keep ourselves healthy. We eat diets to avoid diabetes. We work out to avoid heart disease, but we don't do anything for our mental health until there's a problem. And if we get ahead of it and think of it as a therapist being a trainer for our brain, it takes some of that sting out of it and some of that stigma. Because what I tell people all the time is I don't need help from my therapist to understand why I feel the way that I do. I can understand my trauma. I know where my pain comes from. I need help learning how to live every day coping with it and how to better manage it so that it doesn't take control of me. And I think men need to understand that it is okay to ask for that help. It's okay to talk about these things and that there's power in that transformation of seeking help.
Yeah, and as a public speaker now, my friend, you help men sort of confront their mental health journey, and you tell them it's important to shine a light on something that we ignore, which is our mental health as men. And I know that you're on a mission to help men not confront their mental health journey in silence. So I'm curious, when you talk to audiences about mental health and not sort of confronting it in silence, what are some of the top things that you want men to understand after you're done one of your keynotes, my friend?
I want them to know that it's okay to feel pain, that it's okay to struggle emotionally, that it's okay to go and ask for help. We bottle this stuff up, and a glaring statistic is that men die by suicide at 4 times the rate as women do. I mean, that's a scary number, and minority men are off the charts. And we bottle this stuff up for so long that we don't even know the damage that it's doing because we've never been taught how to process our emotions. We've never been taught problem solving or how to de-escalate things. We've just always taught that better, more powerful, stronger is always the winner. And it's okay to not be okay sometimes. I know that's a hot phrase right now, that it's okay to not be okay, but it is. I have friends that I spend time with that, I have ones that are my sounding boards that I can talk to about stuff, and they talk to me about things, and their shared experience is so helpful for anybody in any situation that you live with. If you're struggling with something and you talk to somebody else that is going through those same things, it releases some of that stigma. And we've got to get past our own egos and feeling like we can do it all and admit when we need help. I mean, look, business owners know if you got a big company, you can't do the marketing, you can't do the sales, you can't do all of it. You have to have people help you do it. And we go through life thinking that we're the CEO of our lives and we have to do every role in the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, how does your background in marketing help you be a more effective speaker? What sort of tangible sort of assets have you taken from your marketing career to make you a better public speaker, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
I think taking complex stories and situations and making them sound simple, where instead of having like a long approach to explaining something, I think I can make it sound more efficient in simpler terms where it's digestible. I think there are a lot of people that are in the mental health space that when they do keynotes will talk over people's heads and they get very clinical. And I come from a different place. I come from lived experience, and what are those emotions and what do those feel like, and how did I react to them, and how can I better help not only the people that are struggling, but the people that are around them so that they know how to handle somebody that may be in a bad place. And I think learning how to give a quick, concise message like you do in marketing has helped me a great deal in my keynote speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friend, I'm going to share just a little bit about myself, something that
Please.
you may not know about me. So, Jason, I spent 7.5 years in speech language therapy because as a result of my disability. My L's and my T's would jumble together. So I spent 7.5 years in speech language therapy, which is ironic now that I'm a public speaker. But I'm curious about how you can take a vulnerability and make it into a strength. Because, if you would have told me when I was 15 years old going through speech language therapy and I'm now 36 and a public speaker, I wouldn't have believed you because I believe that life is a big opportunity for resilience. Circumstances are either something you learn from or it gives you a chance to lead. So I'm curious to ask you, how do you think vulnerability can be a superpower for men?
I think that owning who you are and being proud of it is extremely important. I decided to take all the things that I thought people felt about me, or that I thought that they'd give me a hard time about, or maybe look down on me for, and I flipped it. I'm like, I'm going to own this. Yes, I'm this guy. Yeah, I'm forgetful sometimes, or yeah, I like to cry sometimes. Whatever it is, I'm self-aware enough to understand what my flaws are, but I can't fix them all. So some of them I'm just going to have to own. And I need to take ownership of those, because if I give that to somebody else to let them decide they're going to use it against me in a way that is unfair. And most of it, what I've realized, is just my own insecurities, that most people aren't actually thinking the negative thoughts that I've put on them. It's just me holding a mirror up to myself. And I had to know that, hey, all these things that happened to me as a kid weren't my fault. Somebody else did these to me. And I've carried that burden as if I was part of that process, as if I had something to do with it, and I didn't. I was an innocent bystander. And I've had to learn how to live a healthy life despite that. And if I allow other people to take my flaws or the negative things that have happened to me in my life and use it against me, it's going to wreck me, right? Like I've come to grips with who I am. I've come to grips with my inadequacies or my perceived inadequacies, and I'm okay with it. I'm happy with who I am. I know I'm a good person. I know that I'm doing things to try to help other people. And I'm just at a place now where I've been hurt so many times that I'm now confident in the people that I have in my life. I've done a good job of processing who's important in my life and who isn't. And the people that are important is who I give all my energy to, and I get that back. It absolutely helps me confirm my sense of self.
Yeah, and I want to dive into giving men the permission structure to cry. And before I ask you to answer the question, I'm going to give you some statistics. So the Priority Group, which is a group that studies mental health, reports that 29% of men don't report mental health because they're embarrassed, and another 20% don't want to deal with the negative stigma about what happens when you express mental health concerns. So I'm curious to get you to answer the question why it's okay for men to cry, and then your thoughts on the statistics I just gave you. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Look, crying for me is a release. I feel things very hard, and what I explain to people sometimes, because there are a lot. I have a lot of friends that come from cultures where they don't cry. That is a sign of weakness. But for me, it's kind of like when you're feeling ill and you're feeling physically sick. It's not going to be fun to go through, but once you get it out that you're going to feel better. And there are some times where I just have to. I can feel it boiling, and if I don't allow that emotion to come out, it's that soda can that gets shaken up, that something's going to happen and it's going to get poked and I'm going to explode everywhere. So for emotional regulation, I have to allow myself moments of empathy and allow myself to be emotional and actually feel things. This whole idea of having armor all the time and not accessing those emotions or those feelings is, that stuff has gone away decades ago, but we're still here sitting in the same place. We're all not that different. We're all trying to figure out life, and we all have pain points. And men are we're so fragile sometimes. Our egos are so fragile that we're afraid any ding is going to completely change the way that people look at us. And so we can't show weakness or flaws. But flaws are what make us human. But I bet when you do speeches and you talk, the things that you're most vulnerable about are probably the things that connect the most with people. And I've noticed that when I talk, when I get really deep into some of my trauma and some of the things that are hardest to talk about, that's what actually develops connections rather than sitting around saying, hey, look how great I am. I overcame this and did that and did that. That's not connection worthy. It's the vulnerability that makes all of us connect in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to. When I do post on LinkedIn or social media, the more I share of myself, the more engagement I get. So I totally agree with you there, my friend. But I'm curious to ask you, Jason, what's the biggest stereotype about men's mental health that you want to demystify? What would be your answer there, my friend?
Simple. That it makes us weak. You are not weak for going and working on your mental health. You are not weak by going and seeking help. It is absolutely normal. It's human. If you had a broken arm, you would go to the doctor. If you had diabetes or any sort of infection or disease, you would go and seek help. Our brains are no different. It is absolutely no different. And some people struggle more than others, and it is okay. And we have to allow other people to feel these things as well without embarrassment or without shame. I speak openly. A couple of years ago, I was in a bad place, and I went and checked into an outpatient facility for 2 weeks because I needed to do intensive group and one-on-one therapy. And I told everybody. I told all of my clients at work. I told everybody because I wanted it to be normalized. I wanted them to see somebody that was successful and living what they perceived to be a happy life, still struggling and admitting that they need to go and get help.
Yeah, Jason, living with a disability, as you know, that I have cerebral palsy. I'm one of 40% of people, according to the University of Michigan, that in some portions of my life, I still live in social isolation because when I don't have support staff, it's more difficult for me to leave my house. So I started this podcast as a way as a social outlet in part. So I'm curious about getting men out of the social isolation of being alone and creating community and really taking accountability for your mental health. So what do you think it means to take accountability for your mental health?
Man, taking accountability is hard for anybody in any sense, right? Like nobody wants to, it's kind of admitting you're wrong and being very self-aware. You talk about isolation, and that's a really tough one because struggling with mental illness, we tend to want to be alone and isolate. And then obviously in the last 4 or 5 years with the pandemic, we've all gotten isolated even more. And socializing is a big part of recovery, and socializing doesn't just need to be out of the house. We have the ability to socialize now. You and I are doing it over Zoom and being able to see each other. We can do it on FaceTime. So even though you can't physically be with somebody, even socializing face to face on a video call is helpful. There's shared experience that comes with getting to know each other and socializing with people. And scientifically, it's one of the best and most positive things we can do for our mental health. And, having the conversations back and forth, we can hold each other accountable, but we're still having fun. It is a great way to help manage your mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jason, I'm curious to also ask you about creating a sense of a structure where men can sort of be independent influencers that take on a larger role of being, sort of an olive branch for a mental health journey. So, because I truly believe, buddy, that struggles and setbacks are not sort of, deterrents. They're opportunities to rewrite your narrative of impact. So tell me how you think men can use their mental health journeys to be positive influence, influences when it comes to mental health.
Well, I think it's great now because you see a lot of athletes, a lot of male athletes that are coming out and speaking out about their mental health. I mean, Kevin Love of the Cleveland Cavaliers and Miami Heat has been really upfront talking about it. There's a boxer named Danny Garcia that's been very open. So you're seeing more and more male athletes opening up and talking about their struggles. And famously, Dwayne Wade talked about when he was retiring that he was going to go to therapy during his retirement phase in order to help him transition out of the NBA into a regular life. And so I think when we see these guys that we look up to, and again that are perceived as alpha males, admitting that they're struggling as well, or that they are getting in front of their mental health, it's just going to help end that stigma a little bit and make it okay for other men to do the same thing. It's just going to take more of us being willing to be vulnerable and honest about it and own it in a way that makes it safe and okay, and show younger kids that this is something we all need to work on. It's the most important thing we have in our bodies is our brains. And we can be physically strong, we can be physically healthy, but if we're not mentally healthy, none of it's worth it.
Yeah, and I'm also curious to ask you if people are listening or watching this today or whenever they watch this. I'm curious if they're inspired to take control of their sort of their mental health capacity. What are three things any men can do that can lead to mental health clarity, my friend? What are three steps that men can take today to sort of alleviate some of the pressure that they're experiencing through their mental health journey? What are your thoughts there?
I think one, if they're reluctant to go get therapy, therapy is always number one for me. I'm a big proponent of therapy, although I know everybody's not comfortable doing it. So my number one would be therapy. And it's important to understand that there's a weird stigma with therapy. If you watch television and the movies, it looks like you're just going to lay on a brown leather couch and some old guy is going to be sitting there taking notes, and that you're going to be crying the whole time. And that's not necessarily what it is. I mean, you're working on things in order to get healthier. I think therapy is a big one. Journaling is huge. Journaling has been extremely helpful for me in a lot of aspects, especially with my anxiety. When I get things written out and I'm talking about it, I tend to start rolling downhill and go to worst case scenario. And when I'm done, I go back and read it, and I realize how ridiculous some of the things that I'm feeling actually sound. And I'm able to see it back, and it's almost like somebody's reading it back to me. I'm going, "Oh God, I'm not that guy. Like, this isn't actually happening." And it allows you to get some things out. I actually use this with my wife. If my wife and I are having an argument and there's some things that I'm trying to get across to her, I'll write a letter and then I'll just sit on it for a minute and I'll go back and read it. And I'm like, nah, this isn't right. And it'll just make me feel better about it. And I won't even, the argument won't even move on because I'm just able to work it out by writing things out. One of the biggest ones for me is finding a creative outlet, whether it's cooking, music, painting.
Yeah.
Yes, I paint. I turned into a painter. I never did it until I read that it was good for anxiety, and I walked into an art supply store and I said, I want to learn how to paint. I don't know what I'm doing. Just give me the basics. And the first time that I put the brush to the canvas, I was hooked. You'll never find me any more relaxed than you will when I'm painting, because I can't think of anything but what I'm working on in that moment. So all the things that I stress about and everything that's rattling around in my brain goes away because I'm only thinking about what's on that canvas.
Yeah, and I'm curious to also ask you if you could wave a magic wand, because mental health resources are often the first thing to go when they're looking to save money in a particular field of the government. So I'm curious if you could wave your wand and increase resources, whether they be government or otherwise. What resources do you think men could benefit from if they had more of? What are your thoughts then?
I think just access to mental health services. I'm doing a challenge in September. I'm climbing. It's called 414ers. I'm going to the peak of 14,000 foot peaks in one day. But I'm doing it to raise money for something called the Headstrong Foundation, which offers mental health services to veterans and former service members. And there's so little access for men because it's not readily available. It's one of the unfortunate things about trying to find help is it takes some work. You either have to go through your insurance and find out who's in network. For a lot of people, their company may have EAP, but a lot of people are afraid to go through that because the assumption is that the company's going to know what's going on with them personally, and it's just not easy to access. It's not like you can just go online and find a therapist. They are incredibly hard to find. So just having access to it can be really difficult. But there are ways to find it. There's SAMHSA, the SAMSHA or SAMHSA.com has a lot of lists of different therapists and mental health services. NAMI.com will also have them, and they'll have them listed by like affordability and things like that as well, and certain areas. It's just hard to find and hard to access mental health help.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to combine my last two questions because they're interconnected. So I'm curious, when you finish a speech and a father or a husband comes up to you and wants to have a further discussion after listening to you speak, I'm curious about connecting authentically with fathers or husbands specifically and helping them sort of create the permission structure within themselves to really express not only their emotions but also their own personal needs in order to thrive in a relationship. Because I think men often think that I have to be a supporter in my marriage for my wife and always give her sort of the permission to tell me what she needs. And sometimes, men neglect to do it for themselves. So I'm curious about what strikes a chord with you when you have conversations with fathers or husbands, specifically about leveling up to the next phase, or in their relationships as a father or a husband. And the second part of that question is, how do you think your work as a mental health speaker will contribute to your legacy? So you can take any part of that question and tackle it, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
It's funny, Kevin, that you mentioned the, after the speeches and people coming up, because I talk about this with other speakers of how do you emotionally handle some of the things that come to you after you do a speech, and talking about something like mental health. It's not something that people want to talk about regularly. So when they see somebody that can understand and they've never talked about it before, they kind of want to unload, and they want to, there's trauma bonding that goes on there. And and I'm sure you can understand this, it's a thin line between wanting to be there and be supportive for them, but not taking on all of their emotions as well, because I'm an empath. I connect with people emotionally, and I'll take too much of that stuff on to where I have to give myself 20, 25 minutes to meet with people afterwards. And then I need to go somewhere and decompress because there's a dopamine release from having the speech, and then you have all these people giving you their trauma, and it's hard to shake, but it's all worth it when somebody comes up to you. I had a speech last year, and afterwards, one guy, as I was walking off stage, ran up on stage and ran to the back to find me. And he says, he's crying. He says, "Can I hug you?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He said, "My son died by suicide last year, and I've never been able to understand or heal. And you helped me heal today. Like, I have a better understanding of what he was feeling." And that feeling alone makes all of it worth it. It just really makes it all worth it. And I have a wife that struggles as well. She suffers from mental illness. And you mentioned how men always feel like we need to be there for our wives. I think we need to give our partners credit for also being strong enough to handle our issues as well. As an example, I had a really bad panic attack last Monday. I've been under a lot of stress lately, and I could feel it building. And I was downstairs in our room, and I felt it coming. I just texted my wife. I said, "I need you to come down here. I'm having a panic attack." And she comes down, she'll rub my back, and the emotions are just pouring out of me. I'm crying, and I don't know why I'm crying. And even then, I know that it's okay, but I'm saying, I'm sorry, because even as much as I talk about it, and I know that it doesn't make me weak, I can't help but think that my wife is going to feel like I'm weak in that moment. Mm-hmm. And all she does is comfort me and say, it's okay. And we have to give our partners credit that they are strong enough to handle this, that they're not going to alter the way that they look at us because we're having a moment like this. And we need them to support us. We can't carry it all on our own.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And Jason, I really want to thank you for joining me to engage in conversation today, my friend. But before we end our time together today, if people want to get connected with you, my friend, what's the best way they can do that?
You can find me on Instagram at Jason Prinzo MH. Same on YouTube, and you can always go to jasonprinzo.com.
Fabulous. Well, my friend, you have certainly had quite the story of both resilience and transformation, my friend. It's really been an honor and a privilege to talk to you this afternoon, and I look forward to our continued friendship as speakers and our continued success as we try to navigate the world of speaking together, my friend. So I want to thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, and it was my honor and my pleasure. And I have to tell you, one of my favorite things about our little community is watching you grow, and you're an inspiration to all of us. I can say that honestly. I look to you quite often and see the things that you're doing, and it inspires me.